Hello. We are going to take a look at a different test today. This is an ACT exam. So, what I like to do in these streams is um, open up a PDF of a practice test for a college prep exam, like the SAT or the ACT, and then just go through the first couple of sections with you to get a sense of how to do these kinds of problems, how to identify what you're looking at, and then how to problem solve for that. So, previously, we've been doing SAT practice test 4. Today, we are working on ACT from June 2018. We're just going to start with the English test and get as far through it as we can today. This will be another separate series on my channel, just so that for those of you who prefer the ACT, that way you guys can have some content too. So, just to briefly introduce myself, my name is Kate. I am a humanities tutor. I also tutor college prep, so things like the SAT and the ACT, right? And what I like to do is work with students to make things make sense. I think a lot of these things aren't intuitive, even if you're a native English speaker, but especially if you're not. And what we can do together, if you work with me or even just follow along on my videos, is just kind of unlock some of those secrets or inferences that you can use to get a really great competitive score on these exams. All right, so without further ado, let's take a look. We're going to do, like I said, this is June 2018 ACT, and we're going to take a look at the English test. So we're just starting right at the beginning. Those of you who've watched the SAT videos can tell this is a slightly different format, but that's okay. There's a lot of the same material. So you might hear similar advice. Okay, so for number 1, what we're going to be doing here is making grammar changes if necessary in the passage. So the first one is this section midway through. So you can just jump right into the sentence. You don't need to read the whole passage. So you can say, their instruments of choice is considered rather unusual, and then it gives a list. So already I'm thinking this doesn't work. Instruments is the subject here, and it is plural, so we need to pair that with a verb that is responsive to the plural noun. So instruments are considered, if that makes sense. Or in this case, we can just say C are. They are, right? So we'll go with C on this one. I'll just draw it. Let's see here. We'll use red today. There we go. Maybe a little thicker than that, right? Oh, too thick. All right, there we go. CR. Great. Okay, so number 2, which choice best maintains the pattern established in the sentence's 2 previous examples? Okay. So this is the list I was talking about. A panpipe fashioned from carrots, an ocarina created from a sweet potato, other brightly colored vegetables. Okay, so we need an instrument and what food item it was made out of. So this would be H, a flute made from a bamboo shoot. Number 3, the sentence says, gourds, daikon radishes, and other vegetables are used to round out the orchestra. So this one, we don't need this comma here. Because we have an items in a series. So gourds, daikon radishes, and other vegetables. These all together are the subject of our sentence. And then we can just have this plural are. So that works well. So this is D. We don't need a comma at the end of used either because we don't want to break up the prepositional phrase. If you have questions about any of these, feel free to jump into the comments. If you want more of an explanation, I'm happy to reply to you guys. All right. From an early age, the Nan brothers, who were raised on a vegetable farm in China's Anhui province, who were taught... Okay, so the subject is the brothers. So this one we can just say were taught. This is G. Alrighty. Number 5. Working by hand while constructing their edible instruments. So this doesn't quite make sense because it has while in here. There's a lot of redundancy. So working by hand while constructing. So constructing is what they're doing. Working by hand means the same thing. So in tests like this, we would really want to just choose one or have a more concise answer. So this type of question is called a concision and precision question. So for example, it's going to give you a lot of questions like, or a lot of answer choices like, A, no change, which has this redundancy here. B is very similar, eating unused vegetable parts while they construct. So this is, not grammatically incorrect, but it is unnecessarily long and contains information that you don't need to have this sentence be successful. So this one, we really just want to say to construct. It's really not important that we know that they are using metal tools here because they already say they're using long metal drill bits here. So it would be redundant again if we mentioned that. So keep that in mind for a concision question. They're not asking you about grammar. They're asking you about structure. Okay, number 6. Wei Ping says that to create a low pitch, which makes a deep hole. That's not correct. This one is he makes. This tells us how it's done, right? So in order to create a low pitch, we have to do something, right? So we need a subject in there. He makes a deep hole. Nonetheless, a high pitch requires a shallow hole. So we're trying to come up with a transition word. So this is a transition question, right? We're going to try to come up with a transition word that puts these two at odds with each other, a deep hole and a shallow hole, right? So this one is conversely because the converse of something is like the flip side, the opposite, right? So we're going to choose the one that puts these as opposites. Other factors like the diameter of the hole and changes in air temperature, humidity. Okay, so we know that we are going to use a comma here because they have a comma here. So we can search through the rest of the sentence or the paragraph to find clues like this if you're not sure. So for example, G, this one is wrong, but I'm going to explain why. So this one uses an N dash, an M dash actually is what this is. But if you were to create, a way that you could use this quote unquote correctly, we would transform it into something called an N dash. So I'll show you what that looks like. So you could say other factors like the diameter, blah, 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 humidity also affects, or it should be affects, we'll get there, the sound quality, right? So you would need to pair these dashes up, one on one side, one on the other. You can't swap in a comma for one of these and have it be grammatically correct, okay? So the difference between that and an M dash, the longer kind, is you can use those alone. Those of you who have seen like ChatGPT memes probably know what an M dash is at this point, but it's when you sort of cast off a related idea that you want to put an emphasis on at the end of a sentence. So you could say something like, apples are often green, but that's not the only, color they come in, right? Or something like that. You could say, like Mary went to the party. She's a homebody. So that was unexpected or something like that, right? You're kind of giving an aside to the audience, right? By the way, that kind of thing is what an M dash is for. Okay, back to number 8. So this one would be H, factors like. I'm going to have to circle it because it's getting mad at me for having that box there. Okay, number 9, we already said is effects. So the difference between affect and effect is something that you're going to get asked a lot on tests like this. It's one of those really classic things that you just have to know. It's a memorization thing. So essentially, the way I would think about it is, I'll type it over to the side here. So you have effect and affect, right? So you can think of the word effect as like cause and effect, right? So there's a cause and there's an effect. So A happens and then B happens. B is the effect, right? So this would be something that comes second. Affect is when you're describing like from a primary position that you've got. So for example, like also affects the sound quality. You're sort of flipping the structure here. You're saying like, let's see, factors affect sound quality. Whereas this would be like the effect of X is Y, right? The effect of factors is bad sound quality or something like that. So it really just has to do with the position in the sentence. So, okay. Anyway, we'll go down to number 10. A newly picked vegetable that sits at the market for even one day may lose much of its water content, producing a pitch that's out of tune. Yeah, so this one's fine. No change. 11. Still, the most critical ingredient in creating high-quality sound, Weidong says, is the vegetable's high water content. Okay, so this is fine because this is a little aside, right? This is something that we're putting between those paired commas. So similar to this up here. Other factors, comma, like the da-da-da, comma. Same deal. You're just setting that slightly aside from the rest of the sentence. And allowing the original construction of the sentence to flow despite that inserted phrase. All right. Now, number 12 is going to give us one of these more difficult questions. Which sequence of sentences makes this paragraph most logical? So, this one, I'm already kind of tipped off that they were going to ask a question like this because they mention here still, the most important thing is high water content. And I'm thinking like, we've already talked about that, right? So you can kind of tell that they're going to ask you to evaluate the order of sentences here. So let's think about it. You'll notice that they've got the sentences numbered 1, 2, 3. So we have a newly picked vegetable that sits at the market may lose much of its water content, creating a pitch that's out of tune. So what this strikes me as is kind of a sentence that's explaining why this is a problem. So the water content related to the age of the vegetable, right? So I would start this sentence or this paragraph with number 3. You've got the transition word here, still, right? So we're talking in the previous paragraph about there's all these other factors like air temperature and humidity, which affect the sound quality. But what we're trying to say is, but the most important thing in producing high quality sound is water content. So this is a great transition from paragraph 3 to paragraph 4. So still, the most critical ingredient in creating high quality sound, Weidong says, is the vegetable's high water content. A newly picked vegetable that sits at the market for even one day may lose much of its water content, producing a pitch that's out of tune. So that's sentence number 1. Because of this, the brothers must carve a fresh set of instruments before each performance. So sentence 2 is going to explain the impact of that fact. So we know that the most important thing is water content. Here's why, and here's what they do about it. So it's going to be 3, 1, 2. That's J. If you have any questions about this, go ahead and put them in the comments. I'm happy to type an answer or make a TikTok about it or whatever. While the brothers' musical repertoire is as varied as their instruments, ranging from traditional Chinese flute music to modern pop songs, and then it ends, right? So I'm tipped off here that this is a transition sentence or a transition question. So we're trying to figure out the phrasal structure here. So we've got this while, we've got an, a word at the beginning that doesn't quite match the structure that we're going for. This one we can just remove while. Let's just go straight to D. The brothers' musical repertoire is varied. Done. While would imply another phrase coming off of the end of this. Pop songs, comma, they didn't start out as varied as they are now, something like that, right? Cool. 14, we've got another evaluative question. So at this point, the writer is considering adding the following true statement. So they tell us it's true so that we don't spend time figuring out the truth value of it, right? You can assume it's true. Each pitch is tested and perfected with the help of an old electronic tuner. Okay, so they're asking, should we put it here at the end? So let's just read like this paragraph and see if it's necessary. So while the brothers' musical repertoire is as varied as their instruments, ranging from traditional Chinese flute music to modern pop songs. They maintain that different vegetables have different scales and are therefore suited to different types of music. Since 2011, the Nan brothers have performed regularly, playing a wide variety of music on their edible instruments and bringing a whole new meaning to the idea of playing with your food. I don't like adding a sentence here because you can tell they're broadening the scope of this paragraph, to this adage, right? Or this, this concept that we're all aware of, playing with your food. They're kind of trying to make it a little humorous at the end there. So we get a nice summary of what the section is about. We got the time, the people, the situation, and kind of the broader scope, right? We call this the universal idea in essay writing. Bringing a whole new meaning to something. How is it more important or more related to everything outside of just this particular question? So we're going to say no. So let's cross off these two and we'll evaluate why it's a no. So this is a two-part question. No, because it provides information about the process of creating instruments that is not relevant at this point in the essay. That sounds correct to me. Let's just check J to be careful. No, because it conflicts with the idea that the brothers have a strong musical background. Okay, so that's not really, it's arguing that they wouldn't, I guess, need to use a tuner if they had a strong musical background. That's obviously not relevant or true. So we're going to go with H. If they wanted to put this in here, it might be more useful in the paragraph we just looked at about how they make the vegetables produce a certain pitch, but no longer relevant here. So then we have number 15, and you'll see it has this note. Question 15 asks about the preceding passage as a whole. The writer wants to add the following sentence to the essay. As teenagers, they performed with a local theater company. This sentence would most logically be placed at, okay, so we can go back and see point A, point B, C, and D. So let's look at point A. So the sentence is, as teenagers, they performed with a local theater company. So point A is here. So brothers Nan Weidong and Nan Weiping are not chefs. They are musicians. They perform with this theater company. Their instruments of choice, da-da-da-da-da. I don't like that. It interrupts the flow of, what they're trying to introduce here, which is they're not chefs. They're musicians. They make instruments out of food. Right? So the theater company is a totally separate point here. So B says they were taught to play conventional musical instruments by their father, a music teacher. As kids, they, were part of this theater troupe. The siblings' love of music and passion for performance led them to begin experimenting with vegetable musical instruments a few years ago. Cool. So this is more relevant, right? Because they mention a passion for performance. So it's kind of detailing how they got started. Point C in paragraph 3. Here we go. So here's how they make it. They use long metal drill bits, stacking out discarded pieces as they work. Wei Ping says that to create a low pitch. No. Okay, so that again, it just interrupts the point. Point D in paragraph 5. So yeah, so this one also would interrupt, they're saying like we make different types of instruments because they have different scales and we can therefore play different kinds of music as it relates to that scale. So this one would be B. That's the passion for performance section. Great. Okay, so next time we will do passage number 2, Nature Meets Art. In the meantime, like I said, if you have any questions, let me know. I'm happy to answer them, and we can tackle the next section of this test together. Thanks so much for watching.